Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the content patch for the 10th of February 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit, with today's gaming news and comment. Coming up in the show, Call of Duty will be moving to a 3-year development cycle, and the developer of Flappy Bird has pulled his game from the App Store. All this and the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. In their Quarter 1 report, Activision Blizzard has announced that they will be moving their Call of Duty franchise over to a 3-year, 3-studio rotation. That means that Sledgehammer Games, the co-developers of Modern Warfare 3, will be responsible for 1/3 of the Call of Duty games going forward. This means that Treyarch will have an additional year to work on their title, meaning that it will come out in 2015, while Sledgehammer's version of the franchise will be released in 2014. In theory, this also means that Infinity Ward has until 2016 to release a title, since they were responsible for the recent Call of Duty Ghosts. This comes, of course, after dropping sales for the Call of Duty franchise and significant criticism leveled at Call of Duty Ghosts, as well as apparent gains for their direct competitor EA's Battlefield franchise. Well, to be frank, I think it's rather nice to see Treyarch actually getting some space. Unfortunately, it is a little bit disappointing. I'm not a fan of the Call of Duty series, but the ones that I have enjoyed have come from Treyarch. Black Ops and Black Ops 2 were both very enjoyable, and Treyarch have been by far the most respectful to the PC audience, actually releasing ports that work properly and make some effort to actually include some PC-specific features. The recent release of Call of Duty Ghosts was anything but that, and continues to demonstrate the lack of respect that Infinity Ward has for PC gamers. So anything that slows down the release of Infinity Ward games to the PC platform is, as far as I'm concerned, a good thing. But we now find ourselves in a really strange situation of having one of the co-developers of Modern Warfare 3 actually making the games on its own, and then you have Infinity Ward essentially cut loose. Now, Modern Warfare 3 was a co-development between Sledgehammer and Infinity Ward. It happened after the big exodus from Infinity Ward, where the co-founders, as well as a lot of the very talented and experienced developers, abandoned that studio in favor of Respawn, who are now, of course, making Titanfall. That left Infinity Ward understaffed. That meant that Sledgehammer, who at the time was actually working on a prototype for a third-person Call of Duty game, was required to drop that and move on to help Infinity Ward finish Modern Warfare 3. And that game wasn't very good. But Ghosts was worse. I mean, I don't think there's really any argument about that. It was piss poor. It's been the worst Call of Duty that I've played in a long time, which is impressive considering Modern Warfare 3 wasn't very good either, but Ghosts was assuredly worse than that even. So I have to wonder exactly whether or not this is going to help or hinder the franchise. You know, the plus side of it is that Treyarch gets 3 years to work on its title. We've seen what they can do with 2. Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 were very good. I think Black Ops 2 is probably the best Call of Duty game since COD 4. But you then have to deal with the fact that the other 2 games that are going to be coming out on a year-by-year basis are much, much weaker. Now, Treyarch used to be the second fiddle to Infinity Ward, but then Infinity Ward got gutted in terms of its talent and now produces terrible Call of Duty games. I think the problem you're now going to have as Activision right now is that there's going to be a massive variance in quality, and I have a feeling that the strength of the brand is not going to maintain for all that much longer. Ghosts already did damage. It very clearly did. It was one of the worst rated COD games, well, in a very, very long time indeed. Let me put it that way. The reaction of the player base, for the most part, has been negative. Sales are down. And does it take another couple of bad COD games before the franchise really starts to die off? Is that how it happens? Will Sledgehammer be able to release something that doesn't suck, and then you follow up with a 2015 Treyarch release that is actually good? I mean, who the hell knows at this point? What it demonstrates to me, at least, is a willingness to shake the franchise up, and I think that the recent relative failure of Ghosts, and I say relative because the game still sold millions upon millions of copies, the relative failure in comparison to the rest of the franchise maybe has woken Activision up just a little bit when it comes to this particular franchise. They don't want it to die off. They want to continue making money from it. They want to keep releasing them year on year. They're basically roster updates. It's effectively a sports game at this point. But as opposed to those regular yearly sports games, you're seeing a massive quality variance in titles, which is really putting people off. So the hope is that when 2015's release comes around, we actually get an absolutely fantastic title. I really hope that Treyarch being given an extra year to work on something actually yields positive results. But who knows if that's what Treyarch really needs, and more to the point, whether or not they'll be able to vary enough from the franchise to actually make it interesting to people again. Black Ops 2 almost had it. Had a more interesting single-player campaign. It had a little bit of branching stuff in there, a few choices you could make. It also had those weird Strike Force missions, which weren't all that good, but at least they tried something different. And the multiplayer was solid. It was also one of the best PC versions of Call of Duty we've had in a long time. But I can only imagine that things are going to get more difficult now that we've moved on to the next generation of consoles, and yet most of the installed user base is still on the previous generation. So you're going to have to release 2 more versions of the game, and you're going to have to optimize for far more platforms. I mean, we've already seen that they evidently can't optimize properly for PC, so God knows what's going to be happening with the versions on next-gen consoles. Call of Duty Ghosts just got a performance patch for the Xbox One because it was running like absolute tosh, and it still runs like absolute tosh on the PC. So I don't know if they're going to be able to handle that. It could end up going down in flames all of a sudden, but I have a feeling Call of Duty is a little bit more enduring than that. So hopefully this is positive, but I'm not necessarily holding out any hope. The one-man developer behind Flappy Bird has taken his game down from the App Store. The announcement came in a tweet that says, "I'm sorry, Flappy Bird users, 22 hours from now I will take Flappy Bird down. I cannot take this anymore." This is something I might add that was retweeted 128,000 times, which is absolutely ludicrous considering only a couple of days ago this guy had about 20,000 followers and he's now passing 200. He followed up to say that it had nothing to do with legal issues, which is to follow up the accusations that he stole sprites and models from the Mario Brothers series, and said that he will not be selling the game to anyone either. He followed up that he will continue to make games, and indeed, he currently still has several games available, including Smashing Kitty and Shuriken Block. A few days ago, it was reported that Flappy Bird was actually earning $50,000 a day in advertising revenue for its creator, who is based in Vietnam. Well, there's a few issues to discuss here. One is the idea that someone can actually turn down that much money because they're being pressured in real life in some way, and whether or not that's actually reasonable. Secondly, the quality of the game in the first place, and whether or not it should have got as popular as it did. What that really represents is what I find particularly interesting. The first point, in terms of trying to get out of the public spotlight, I can actually understand this. I know it's ridiculous to a lot of people. The idea that giving up $50,000 a day in revenue is actually worth it for the sole purpose of trying to have a quieter life. But if you are in the spotlight and you're thrust into the spotlight unexpectedly, it can be quite hard to deal with. It's a much, much smaller example, but I'd like to make it anyway. I've been dealing with the spotlight or whatever for a number of years as a reasonably successful YouTube channel. And there are definitely times when I have thought about canceling series or deleting videos or whatever, because it's extremely easy to get hung up on all the negativity. A series that I do which is very successful is the Hearthstone series. Makes a lot of money, it has a consistently high viewer base, it's very successful. And yet, there's been plenty of times when I've wanted to cancel it, even though I love playing Hearthstone and I really like doing that series, because the comments have really put me off and they've actually made me very sad at times. And that sounds pathetic, doesn't it? It's like, you can't deal with criticism. But I think that there are just some people that are not built for that. In fact, I think there's a lot of people who aren't built for it, and the only reason that we don't see more of that happening is that most people never get put in that situation in the first place. I think the vast majority of people are not built to deal with that amount of communication from people they don't know, that's anonymous, often barbed, often very mean, and all that kind of thing. And it's very easy to obsess over the negativity. You might think, well, you get so many more positive comments. It doesn't matter, because you don't see that. You see the negative. There's maybe hundreds of compliments, then you see that one negative comment, and you fixate on that. You know? And that can ruin your day. It really can. And I imagine this guy living in Vietnam in particular, and making a huge amount of money, has most likely become the target of all manner of nefarious folk. So people trying to get in on that money, people trying to scam him, con him, threaten him. I mean, this guy has received death threats, there's no question about that, and unfortunately it is something that online personalities often have to deal with, but you just thrust into that out of nowhere, it's very hard to deal with that, and some people just aren't built for it. Again, I don't think most people are. So I think that is actually reasonable, as ridiculous as it sounds. And here's the thing. You can still play Flappy Bird, and unless he's closed that ad revenue account, there are still going to be people playing that game and generating a huge amount of ad revenue. And more to the point, the guy's probably earned what he needs to live comfortably for years to come at this point. And he said to himself, all right, that's okay. You can also consider the notion, as ridiculous as it sounds, and I think this is going to be even more unbelievable for some people, that he's actually not proud of that game, and that he really hates what it represents. Because honestly, it's a clone, and that game sucks. There's no real question about that. Flappy Bird is a bad video game. It's a clone of innumerable helicopter-style games. There is not a single unique mechanic, or even a unique aesthetic in that entire game. It's stolen. The whole thing is stolen, and if you are actually a proud developer and that kind of thing gets popular, even though it was something that you just intended to make just for practice, then yeah, you might consider taking that down, because that is something that you cannot personally be proud of. I've taken down videos that have been good earners before because I've not been proud of them. Perhaps I should do it more. That's small potatoes in comparison to the amount that he earned from that game, but I can understand that point of view. Admittedly, it's not particularly financially responsible, although if you want to be a game developer in the future, your best-selling and most successful game should probably not be something that was stolen from somebody else. That's not going to get you very far, even in the wild west of the mobile games market. Some people have also argued that it's a marketing move from him. It's designed specifically to drum up headlines so that the rest of his games, which are apparently a little bit better, will actually get attention as well. You know, he's going to be a popular developer for quite some time now, but I think that's reaching, honestly. You know, it's like, yes, I'm going to take down my extremely profitable game in a questionable marketing move. Like, no, I don't think he's actually going to do that. I am interested to know what the status of that ad account is, though. If he's still making revenue from Flappy Bird, then I think it'll do just fine. What does this mean for mobile game development? We have had a lot of headlines regarding mobile game development lately, and this is not new stuff. Mobile game development is chock full of terrible video games. There are good games, but they are much fewer and far between than you'd find on a regular gaming platform. You know, even the Wii's full back catalog is far superior to what is available on mobile devices. Mobile devices are chock full of absolute tat. The barrier to entry is very low, it's easy to make a mobile game, and really, a lot of these developers are just playing the lottery and hoping to strike it rich, and in the case of Flappy Bird, it did, even if that wasn't the developer's original intention to begin with. Flappy Bird got successful basically as a result of word of mouth, even though the game is just awful. It's created, in my opinion, a very toxic environment when it comes to development on mobile platforms, and the reason that I say that is because if you happen to be a developer that's capable of making something good, why the hell would you want to put it on a mobile device where it's least likely to succeed? Sure, port it later on, but if you want to actually sell your game on its merits, putting it on mobile is a terrible idea, because there are a ton of really good games on mobile that are not successful in any way, and there's a ton of terrible games on mobile that are very successful. Consider that mobile game development has become the absolute worst when it comes to monetization and the practice of developing games that are specifically designed to milk the maximum amount of revenue out of a player that they possibly can. Because that's what, say, games like Dungeon Keeper are, or indeed other games that are very similar to that. The only reason why Dungeon Keeper's been getting so much attention lately is because it took a beloved franchise and took a giant dump on its corpse, you know. It's a game that actually got hardcore gamers to break out their mobile devices because it said, wow, a new Dungeon Keeper, and they discovered firsthand what they'd previously been avoiding, the fact that, yes, a lot of mobile games are developed in this way, and it's absolutely disgusting. Some people have actually considered the success of Flappy Bird to be a good thing for the mobile games development scene. I would argue the exact opposite. If I was a developer, I would be looking at Flappy Bird and I would just be saying, why the hell do I even bother? Because this is a person that did not try. He developed the game in a few days. You know, I'm not blaming him for that because, again, a lot of students and a lot of just random indie devs cut their teeth on mobile development. Yeah, they upload basic clones and things like that. That's very, very common indeed. It's not his fault that it got successful, but if I was a developer and looking at that and saying, this guy made $50,000 in a day from a crappy helicopter clone, and the consumers are dumb enough to actually buy into it, then I would just give up on development entirely. It's actually, I think, quite a similar situation to people trying to start off on YouTube and create good quality content, and then seeing that the most popular content is absolute tosh, you know? It's like, top 100 Vine compilation, or some screechy Let's Play, or some ridiculous cat video. That's apparently how you make money on YouTube, not by making quality content. It's incredibly discouraging. And think about it, that is what the latest generation is growing up on. Those are the games that they're experiencing. They're playing Flappy Bird and Farmville and Simpsons Tapped Out and Dungeon Keeper instead of playing actual real games that have some sort of merit to them. The risk is that that could have a very long-term impact on things. The current games industry is very successful, but over time, it could start to degrade because the people that grew up with Flappy Bird and Simpsons Tapped Out expect more experiences like that, which are bare minimum in terms of effort required or time requirements or anything along those lines. They become okay with the notion of that form of monetization, and more companies shift away from making extremely expensive AAA games, or indeed just good games in general, towards making absolute tat for a mobile device, because it's a bigger audience, it's easier to do, it costs less money, and apparently you can make more from it. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about a video game crash in 2014. I'm not worried about the impact of Dungeon Keeper and Flappy Bird and nonsense like that right now. I'm worried about its impact 20 years down the line, when the people that grew up with video games like Mario and Zelda and Master of Orion and Dune 2 become that much older generation, and the up-and-coming generation are the guys that are really driving the market, as opposed to the 50-sums who are worried about other things that perhaps don't have time to game anymore. That is a very worrying prospect for video games, I've got to say. The only positive thing to come out of this whole endeavor with both Flappy Bird and Dungeon Keeper is that I think it has shined a light into an otherwise dark place. I'm extremely bothered by the fact that so many forums have kind of joined a counter-circle jerk when it comes to Dungeon Keeper, because initially, people discovered Dungeon Keeper, they discovered it was terrible, and there was a lot of articles surrounding how terrible it was, and a bunch of reviews, and now it's kind of the other way around, because if you keep talking about it, people are already sick of that news story, and will actually push the other way. There are people who are legitimately saying, without a hint of irony, this is okay because they're a business. I was like, no, it's not okay just because you're bored of it. That's absolute bollocks. All that demonstrates to me is that consumers are willing to forgive and forget incredibly quickly and pre-order whatever it is the next piece of tat that a major publisher actually puts out happens to be. It's like, no, don't let them get away with this kind of stuff. They took a beloved franchise and took a piss on it. Not only that, but they developed an incredibly predatory game that is chock full of deception and misleading nonsense. Did you know that in Dungeon Keeper, on Android I believe, if you rate the game less than 5 stars, it redirects you to a feedback form instead of actually registering your score? You can rate it 1 star or whatever, but it's more difficult to do. They deliberately try and steer you away from the App Store rating system. That is twisted and evil. Are you kidding me? You can't let them get away with that kind of stuff. You can't let them get away with taking a franchise and just absolutely destroying the memory of it. Because eventually it will be a franchise that you care about. And then you'll wonder, well, why didn't someone speak up before and actually try and stop this in its tracks? The annoying thing about the whole mobile situation is that we are not the target demographic. And it actually doesn't make a bunch of difference if we all say as hardcore gamers, we're not going to buy into this, because a bunch of other people will. Now, the best thing that we can try and do is educate people to what good games actually happen to be, regardless of what the format is. Now, if you see your younger sister or a friend playing some crappy mobile games, suggest to them a better one. Increase the quality of their gaming life. It's not too difficult to do, surprisingly enough. It's just these people don't actually know any better. Like those edgy wannabe game critics say, it's a business. It's a business, man. Okay, cool. Well, that means the developers will go where the money is, right? So if people start buying good games, they'll have to make good games. I know. Insane. What a crazy idea. All right, folks, that's me done for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch. Before I go, the OC Remix track of the day. It's been a while, hasn't it? As I said before, the current news is fairly light on the ground, so this show will be intermittent. The hope is that it goes back to 5 days a week at some point, but I can't really guarantee that. Anyway, here's something hot off the presses for you. Came out in the last few days over on ocremix.org, and it's a remix of a track from Shadow of the Colossus, which of course had a astonishing soundtrack, and this is a medley of various tracks, including Castle in the Mist, Epilogue, Those Who Remain, Ico, You Were There, the Prologue to the Ancient Land, The Farthest Land, and Heal. This is remixed by Kevin Penkin. The original composer for the track was Kawatani, and it is fantastic. Bunch of synth orchestra stuff, but done very well. It doesn't perhaps take the prize for the best Shadow of the Colossus remix. I think that has to go to 2007's Wanderer on the Offensive. But this one's called Trico Flies, and it is really great. You can download it for free in the description below this video, and I'll see you next time.